this program first started, I had to make a really interesting decision. Sarah asked me to be a coordinator, and I was like, I kind of want to be a coordinator, but I also want to be a fellow. And I knew that if I said no to being a coordinator, I would feel jealous forever. So I had to do it. But also, Sarah allowed me to work with the fellows and be a fellow as well. So it was great to do both, which was, at times it was a little ambitious, but it worked out. And so this project actually started 3 years ago, even before all this started. I wanted to do a rhetorical analysis, and so I decided to do a rhetorical analysis of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. And I asked students, I said, students, when was slavery abolished? And a student raised his hand and said, yes, sir. He said, 1965. I said, okay, we got to start from the beginning, don't we? And so I realized, I think one of the reasons why a lot of students from Montgomery College have a hard time understanding the civil rights movement is because a lot of them, some of them aren't from the United States. A lot of them are from other countries. And two, this kind of reflects on my educational background. It just wasn't taught that well to me when I was in grade school. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to use the Library of Congress's resources to augment their understanding of the civil rights movement, to understand it more. And to do that, I wanted to use primary source material. And so I used two reading rooms, essentially, the prints and photographs reading room and mostly the newspapers and periodicals reading room. And that allowed the students to have a deeper sense of the civil rights movement. I mean, it's easy for me to sit in front of a classroom and tell them all this stuff, but for them to actually read archival information, to see primary sources of the time period, is far more lasting. So these are my kids. This is Josue, that is Hardik, and that is Michael Martinez. The newspaper periodicals reading room was an interesting experience. About 10 of them showed up on a Saturday, which I was very impressed about. And they wanted to, first I said, okay, let me get you on the computers, you can use the databases, we can do all this. And then one of the students was like, what's that? What's that thing? Oh, that's microfiche. Oh, you go show us how to use it. I'm like, oh, okay. And one of the assistants there showed how to use the machines. That's all they did for 3 hours. Like, I was just blown away. One of those guys, Hardy, he walked by me with 5 things of microfiche. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm researching. Like, he looked at me like, I'm doing exactly what you told me to do. And it's funny, using the machines, and it took a while warming up, it took us a while to understand how to use it, but they really appreciated going through the newspapers and one at a time, sheet after sheet, looking for information that's going to make their paper better. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But I was extremely impressed with how quickly they took to this old way of looking at information. And one of the students was like, this is neat. Like, this is cool to do. And in fact, them using the newspapers and microfiche allowed them to have a deeper sense of what was going on at the time. For the most part, it worked out well. There was a little bit of different things they had to learn. I had to teach them how to have patience with research. Before they even did anything, I said, you might spend all day here and not find anything that will help you. And they understood that, they took it, and for the most part, we shared information. So all the students, they used one USB drive to collect anything they got from the microfiche, and they were able to dip back into it later. I used a cloud service. And so what I did was I took all the different PDFs they made that day and I put it into one cloud file, and then I sent the link to them, and they could click on it and use it. And that was really helpful. They were able to kind of they were able to work together in a really good way. That's something I'm definitely going to keep again. Them doing that together was a really good experience. So my students use a variety of resources at the Library of Congress. They use newspapers, periodicals mainly, but they also use books and resources provided for them from the main reading room. A few of them found some interesting resources from different reading rooms, and it was a learning experience for me. And that was something that the fellows and I talked about. Every time we sent students there, or every time we went there, we were able to kind of chip at the problem. Okay, how do we send kids here? And we learned, okay, it's not a good idea just to kind of put them in a room and leave them. You kind of have to scaffold, you have to kind of get them ready for it, but then eventually it all works out. We also had interesting orientations. We had a really good orientation at the photographs and prints reading room, at the prints and photographs reading room, sorry. And they were able to see civil rights photos and prints of the time period, not just from the civil rights movement of African Americans, but also from the Japanese internment camps, which John will talk about more with you. So it was a cultural experience for them. This photo here, the Library of Congress had the Civil Rights exhibit, which was fantastic, by the way. If you know people who put on exhibits, you might put a bug in their ear to do it again. We were really lucky to have this flag. This flag was hoisted out of the NAACP office in New York, I believe, every time a man was lynched. So the next day they put this flag out, and John also is going to talk more about that. But that's the actual flag. And for extra credit, I told my students, come to the Library of Congress, take a picture of that flag, find out why it's important. And each one of them had to write a 2-page write-up about why the flag was important. And so I think it's interesting that when this picture was taken, I took this picture, that's the actual primary source. But then the students, you can see the reflection in their iPhones. And so a lot of times we talk about the digital, right? How the students are on their phones, students are using their phones, students are using digital. We have to meet them where they are. Well, we can do that, but we also have to understand what we're going to do with it. We can hand kids an iPad and say, research, but they're like, I can use this as a Frisbee, I can use it as a plate. But if you show them what to do with it, it makes far more sense. It works far more better. And so a lot of times these kids use their digital devices to take pictures of the Library of Congress, to do their research. And I think in some ways they actually understood that it's not just a toy, it's actually a tool they can use. That was not my only job. As a coordinator, my main job as a coordinator was work with Barry Howard. And so a lot of times I would throw out ideas about reading rooms that we could go to, and then Barry would send back ideas that could work. He'd make connections there, I'd make connections with him. And that was most of the work, is making those connections. I also had to interview potential fellows. I had to schedule important events. I learned the value of Outlook mail, and also I learned a valuable experience about working intensely with other people. I feel like I'm a very patient person, and there were times when I'm like, I just need you to email me back. I was looking at my computer, just send me a confirmation, somebody. And so a lot of times, a project like this, especially in a pilot form, takes a lot of patience on everybody's part. But when it all comes together, like it did today, it's really worth it. My job was also to catalog our experiences for posterity. So the reports that you have, I collected probably 70% of it. And in hindsight, and hopefully if we get to do this more, I will definitely spend a lot of time writing people's names down in a more efficient pattern. So we met a lot of people, and developing relationships with different reading rooms for future visits. And I can't stress this enough. It's important, like, I tell people this as a one-on-one coordinator for composition, and I tell my students this, and I tell this people when I talk to. Humanities, right? It's people. Like, they're people. Like, we can study writing, we can read books, but at the end of the day, if you don't know how to have a conversation with a person and say, hey, my name is so-and-so, how you doing? Then it's almost like a moot point. Like, a lot of our learning, one of the reasons why we read books, one of the reasons why we watch good movies, one of the reasons why we listen to good music is so we can understand each other better, right? And so developing those relationships with individuals made this pilot far more successful than it could have been otherwise. That's it.